Hey there, welcome. It's the James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Welcome back to the big show. Well, in D.C. right now, we have a bunch of senators who are sworn in, sitting at their important-looking desks, and going to try and ignore the Mayorkas impeachment. And here to make some sense of it, coming back to the show, Dr. Matthew Wilson, professor over at SMU. Is there any chance this actually passes the Senate, or is this sort of dead on arrival?
Well, it depends on what you mean by passes the Senate. There is no chance of Mayorkas being removed from office. No way that 2/3 of the Senate is going to vote to remove him. The bigger question is whether they even have a trial at all. And that's a simple majority vote because the Democrats are immediately going to move to dismiss these charges and to therefore just not even hold hearings on the House articles of impeachment. That'll be a closer run thing. All it would take is one or two Democrats to side with Republicans in order to at least force a trial to take place. So that's what we'll see in the coming days, whether that will happen or not.
Wouldn't that be political suicide for them?
To refuse to hold hearings? I don't know that it would be.
No. I mean, if you were a Democrat that crossed over and voted in favor of having the hearings.
I think that you'd get a lot of backlash within the Democratic Party. Now, that said, some of the Democrats in the Senate are running for re-election in conservative-leaning or very moderate states. And so people like John Tester in Montana and, Sherrod Brown in Ohio, they might feel some pressure not to vote to shut down the whole process. So, as I say, all it takes is one or two to cross the aisle and vote with Republicans, and we might see that happen.
What's the precedent for this? They say a sitting cabinet member hasn't been ejected since like the Civil War or something crazy like that. How long has it been?
Well, it has been well over a century, and it's true. This is not the norm. I mean, it is very unusual for a cabinet secretary to be impeached. It has, for most of American history, been very unusual for a president to be impeached. Now, for good or for ill, we seem to be using impeachment a lot more often lately than we have historically. I mean, Democrats and Republicans seem very eager to use the impeachment process against each other. I would argue on balance that's a bad thing for democracy, but it's true that we are in unusual territory with this.
So Mayorkas does get removed. Are they immediately going to have Biden appoint someone else and then the Senate has to vote on this new guy? Will we probably wait until the election to replace him? Like, what happens even if they do get what they want?
Yeah, if Mayorkas were to be removed, which I say is exceedingly unlikely, but if that were to happen, then President Biden would have the right to appoint a replacement, but that replacement would have to be confirmed by the Senate. If the Senate did not act, he could nominate someone as the acting secretary in the meantime, and that may well be what would happen for the rest of this year.
So, do the outcome of this Senate vote right now? This is all or nothing. It could just die this week, and that'll be the end of the story. Is that right, Dr. Matthew Wilson?
That's right. If Democrats move to dismiss the charges, which I think is what they will do, if they get 50 votes to dismiss the charges, then Kamala Harris will cast the tie-breaking vote, and that'll be 51, and then that'll be the end of this. There will be no hearings in the Senate. There'll be no trial in the Senate. The Senate will just refuse to act on this. If, on the other hand, they fail to muster 50 votes to dismiss, then there'll have to be a trial at some point. We'll see when that gets scheduled and what that looks like. But that's the thing in the short term to look for is, do these charges just get dismissed outright, or are we going to have some type of hearings and trial about them?
Well, Professor Wilson, on my side-by-side, on Fox News, they're talking about the Mayorkas impeachment trial. On MSNBC, they're talking about the Trump trial. And I don't think I like this. I can't put my finger on it specifically, but the election season shouldn't be a competition between two trials on either side.
That's right. As I said before, I think that we are starting to overuse the impeachment process. I mean, Donald Trump was impeached twice, obviously not removed from office either time. The House tried to impeach Joe Biden, right? They had an impeachment inquiry into President Biden. I mean, impeachment is supposed to be an extraordinary remedy for very severe misdeeds. It's not supposed to be the answer when you think that the person has done something distasteful or just improper. It's supposed to be an extraordinary remedy, and I think we're getting a little too trigger happy with impeachments in our political system. Likewise, the what Republicans refer to as lawfare against Donald Trump is not a way to decide political outcomes either. A lot of the charges, I'm not saying necessarily every one, but a lot of the prosecutions against President Trump are pretty dubious. They're real stretches of the law, like the one playing out right now in Manhattan. I mean, it requires some real legal gymnastics to even get this case in court. And I completely agree with your sentiment that this is not the way we ought to be making decisions in a democratic society.
Right. And not to say, he started it or it's his fault, but it's kind of hard to feel sympathy toward the Republicans because I feel like they did start it with the frivolous impeachment stuff under Bill Clinton and the Lewinsky situation.
Well, I mean, that was in some ways, that's what kicked it off, was in the 1990s, the impeachment of Bill Clinton. And of course, he was not removed from office either. And then it has really, really accelerated over the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, I think that's patient zero for this very annoying lawfare process that we have going on now. But thanks for your insight there. This is Dr. Matthew Wilson from SMU. Thanks for being on the James Show again.
All right, thanks for having me.
All right, you have any strong opinions, thoughts on the Mayorkas? I mean, is this all just the show? Is this all just trying to generate negative headlines or to try and look good? Because, Senate, y'all could be passing laws. Y'all could be balancing the budget right now. Y'all could actually be doing other things besides trying to get rid of this dude. But, they don't put me in charge of such things now, do they? 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. Also coming up, quite a few people seem to be upset that Caitlin Clark's rookie salary is only going to be $76,000 in the WNBA. I'm going to make the case, and politely so. I don't mean this nearly as harsh as it sounds, but she's lucky it's that high. I'm James Parker. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Hey there, welcome. This is The James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Welcome back to the big show. Well, Israel's military chief came out yesterday and said, we know what we're going to do to respond to Iran's little weekend flurry. What are you going to do? Not telling. Oh, okay, well, fine. Don't tell me. So now we're all left over here to guess. And so to make a more educated guess, let's bring in my next guest, Brent Sadler with the Naval Warfare and Advanced Technology Allison Center for National Security. Welcome back to the show, Brent Sadler. What do you think Israel is going to do in retaliation to this? Are we going to see a big strike?
Well, I mean, it's speculation, and the only ones that really know are sitting in Jerusalem right now making those plans. What I could probably try and give a little clarity is what kind of capabilities the Israelis have and the defenses the Iranians might be able to put up against it. So kind of from the easiest to the hardest, the easiest thing is for the Israelis to kind of take out Iranian forces that are in the Red Sea that are ostensibly supporting the Houthis and attacking international shipping. Specifically, the spy ship they've had out there for a couple of years now, the Bashad. And so taking that out could be done from the air from a naval vessel, submarine or a surface ship. That's one thing. That would send a statement. It would also be very beneficial. That's the easy end. And it's not equivalent to what the Iranians did to Israel on Saturday. So probably not high in the likelihood. The other is, and probably something they're going to do no matter what, but maybe they could actually expand and really double down hard because it's clear it impacts the Iranians and the mullahs in Tehran. That it's going after aggressively the IRGC's leadership. That's like a mafia. They're the ones that get the money, the weapons, and they also provide the guidance and the direction to these proxies from Iraq to Syria, Lebanon, and of course the Houthis in Yemen. So take those guys out. That's what triggered this current exchange. It's also what President Trump did when he took out Soleimani back in January 2020, and things quieted up very quickly afterwards. So that's probably in the medium to harder, and they're probably going to do it anyway. Again, it's not proportionate, though, still.
Right. So let's go for people call for proportionate, which I think is just borderline brain damage in a war situation. Who the heck wants a proportionate response in war? You're supposed to win the dang thing. But let's go ahead and assume they do the proportionate response. If Israel does launch a bunch of rockets and ballistic missiles or cruise missiles or drones at Iran, does Iran have a similar capability to be able to shoot them down?
They have some capability from the Russians. their air defense systems, some of which we've seen how poorly they performed in the war with Ukraine, like the S-300s and the S-400s. But there is some capability. It's certainly not the strong suit of the Iranians. The strong suit for the Iranians are two things. One, their missile arsenal and their drones. And the second is their paramilitary or asymmetric kind of assassin squads. And I guess terrorists, kind of like boat squads that go around and terrorize shipping in the Straits of Hormuz. That's their strong suit. It's not a very strong suit to begin with.
So what defensive capabilities do you think they would employ if there was an Israeli strike? Are they going to scramble fighter jets or something?
I think they would try. And the Israelis have the Jericho missile, which does have the ability to range most targets in Iran. But most importantly, I think, is the oil production. So you have Karg Island, which is pretty far up in the northern part of the Arabian Gulf. And then you've got Bandar Abbas, which is right at the Straits of Hormuz. Karg actually facilities is about 70 to 80% of all their oil revenue passes through those facilities. And the regime relies on that money to keep itself afloat. It also uses that money to fund what it's doing with the proxies. And you take that out, you impact a lot of nefarious bad behavior. It will have some potential impact on Americans in a short term for higher gas prices, but markets adjust. That'll be transitory, but the impact on Iran will be severe. The other one is it has a secondary effect on China. China buys the vast majority of Iranian oil, so China would be stuck with trying to find another source to meet its energy needs, and that's also kind of good for a lot of folks beyond Israel as well.
Who's Iran leaning on right now for refinery capabilities?
So Iran does its own, and they ship almost all of their oil goes to China as its customer.
So if we do see a response from Israel sometime soon, what's the probability that it's not military at all? Because there's a case to be made that they're already ahead in this battle because they took out one of Iran's generals, and Iran had a pretty feckless response. So maybe we could see a non-military response from Israel? ?
I don't think that's in the cards. I mean, the scale. So the claims that are coming out of the White House right now that there was forewarning, we're hearing also reports here in D.C. that that's not really the case. The fact that the Iranians orchestrated the attack such that it gave a lot of forewarning, I don't think there are a lot of people that are buying that either. It was clear that this was a massive attack. It was fired from various directions and also with various types of weapons, from ballistic, ostensibly also hypersonics, cruise missiles, and drones, with the intent of overwhelming Israeli defenses. Didn't work. Doesn't mean that wasn't their intent, and definitely appears their intent by what they did on Saturday. And so I think a response is warranted, because this type of attack by Iran cannot become the new normal. It cannot be normalized.
Well, the other thing I find completely bizarre about the situation, and more specifically our government's involvement in it, is this floating pier that we're building for Gaza to get more supplies and aid in there. Like, isn't there some sort of moral problem with funding both sides of a conflict this heavily?
Well, this is the complexity and the ugliness of this, where the United States finds itself between the Palestinians and the Israelis. Unfortunately, supporting the Palestinians in Gaza, it's hard to separate that from not supporting Hamas. And so the policies that the administration are pursuing are really untenable, because you are indirectly, and in some cases directly, supporting an organization you say also is a terrorist organization. So you're right. But as far as this pier, I'm not so sure it's going to actually arrive in any time soon. These boats are still making their way across the Atlantic. 2 had to turn around because of engine problems. So I think what was going to be 2 months before they arrive, I think we're looking at even many more months before this pier ever gets built. And maybe that was the intent of the White House, was to promise something they knew would take forever to get there, and wishful thinking that the events on the ground would play out and the war would be over by the time this floating barge arrives.
Well, thank you very much, Brent Sadler, for breaking some of that down. I appreciate you being on the James Show.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Well, we do know a response. We're being told, at least, that one is imminent, but what will it be and what do you think it should be are two different questions with two different answers. If you have any answers, 800-288-WBAP, 800-288 9227. I'm James Parker. We'll talk about this new move to oust the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, coming up next on The James Show. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Hey there, welcome to The James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. There's a move to get rid of the Speaker of the House. This is, I have a standing rule that I am just skeptical of anybody being kicked out of their position when we're within an election year. And now that we're within, less than 7 months from the election, I know it's just right around the corner. It's almost Christmas. I'm skeptical. While I'm skeptical of Mayorkas being kicked out of his office, not that he doesn't deserve it, not that I think he did a good job, not that I would have chosen him in a million years to have that position, but also with the Speaker of the House. Look, if you don't like your Speaker of the House, all you got to do is wait, and there will be a new one. A new one's coming up. Within a year, you're probably going to have a new one. But I give it a little more credence when it's an intra-party beef. When it's an inter-party beef, when Donald Trump is being pursued for charges by, obvious Democrat players, I'm skeptical. When Mayorkas is being impeached because he's a Democrat and a bunch of Republicans are trying to make him look bad because it's, politically beneficial for the entire party and movement as a whole, super skeptical. But when you have these little internecine squabbles, I'm less skeptical. In fact, this is almost, dare I say, principled, believe it or not. It's been very frustrating for you to watch Republicans be sent to the Congress many times with significant majorities and not be able to get so much of what you consider just the basic policy preferences enacted. And it's almost like they're not trying. They're not trying to balance the budget. They're not trying to repeal Obamacare. They're not trying to end forever wars. They're not trying to do a lot of the stuff that you want them to do. And there's always the great excuse when they're out of power. But when they're in power, you got to start looking at the top. You got to start blaming the Speaker of the House. I mean, that's where a lot of this lies. And why do they want to get rid of him? Not because he can't raise money good, or not because he had an affair on his wife, or there's some other goofy scandal. The reason why so many other Republicans in Congress are upset with him is because his deficits didn't go down. In fact, his deficits are higher now than they were under, dare I say it, Nancy Pelosi. I mean, how bad does it have to get before you start pretending to be a fiscal conservative again? He was also the tie-breaking vote on the FISA renewal last week. What? You had a virtual tie, and the Speaker of the House broke the tie, voted with the Democrats and a handful of other Republicans who broke with the rest of the party. Yeah. So you have that. I mean, there's a few other things, but here's where it also gets interesting. It's not just the regular old Freedom Caucus sort of libertarian mutant wing of the Republican constituency. Marjorie Taylor Greene's the first one to brought up the proposal. Now Thomas Massey has seconded it. And look, these are two different branches. These are two different rooms in the Republican compound. Because Marjorie Taylor Greene is from the wing that is not the establishment. She's not a neocon, but she is more of a social conservative and less libertarian, less economically driven. I don't even know what her views on drug prohibition are, but I know Thomas Massey is in this tiny, narrow sliver of people who, for the most part, it's what I believe in. I'm far more libertarian than anybody in Congress. Including probably Tom Massey, but the Rand Paul, the Mike Lee. This is a narrow little group that has some sort of fringe members too, like a Jim Jordan or a Ted Cruz. They're not really libertarianish Freedom Caucus types, but they will join it for certain issues, and this is kind of one of them. So if you have Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massey both agreeing to this, then the only part of the Republican Party apparatus that's still supporting Mike Johnson is that neocon establishment vanguard. It's the same school that birthed other failures in your movement, like John McCain and Mitt Romney and John Boehner and Paul Ryan. And, it's been a very disappointing run here. Well, if they can get him out, the big question is, who do they replace him with? Well, this is a chance for real change to happen. For change to happen and for things for policies to be rewritten or passed or amended in the way you want, there's going to have to be more change in the Republican Party than the Democrat Party. It's not just sending Republicans there. It's sending the right kinds of Republicans there. And look, you can make the same case for Democrats. It's not just sending Democrats there, it's sending the right kind. But listen to Rand Paul make his case on ousting the speaker.
Can we trust government to use FISA appropriately and legally?
Absolutely not. Americans shouldn't be spied on by their own government. The Fourth Amendment was put in by our founding fathers to protect us. FISA doesn't obey the Fourth Amendment. And so Speaker Johnson was incredibly wrong. He broke the tie. He voted with the Democrats. Here we have the leader of the Republicans in the House votes with the Democrats against a warrant requirement. We also have Speaker Johnson voting for the spending package, once again, with a majority of the Democrats. As I see it now, I'm not sure there's a difference between Mike Johnson being in charge and the Democrats being in charge. The deficit this year will be $1.5 to $2 trillion, and that's Mike Johnson's bill. He put it forward. He supported it with a minority of Republicans, with a majority of Democrats. This is not using the power of the purse. This is abdicating the power of the purse.
When you see someone in one party hold someone else in their exact same party accountable, look at the reasoning behind it. Are they doing it based on principles, or are they doing it based on politics? They're not wanting to get rid of Mike Johnson because he got caught with an affair. They're not wanting to get rid of Mike Johnson because he said a bad word on a hot mic. They don't want to get rid of him because he can't fundraise, or because he's unpopular, because he smells like a sack of rotten eggs. They're wanting to get rid of him based on these specific policy preferences, these actions, actually, these votes, these issues. I like that. We need to see more of that. More Rand Paul, Tom Massey, less Mike Johnson. See if that doesn't get you a better result. I'm not guaranteeing a better result, but we already see the result we get from this guy. So, I mean, I would say, like, who do you think should be Speaker of the House? But really, none of us are qualified for that. Who do you have a ranking of all the congressmen from all the other districts, and if how much they match you? I mean, you may have like a good general idea, but I'm always way out on left field. I'm ready for something bizarre and attention grabbing to happen with the Speaker of the House. There's no rule that says the Speaker of the House has to be a member of Congress. That's sort of been the de facto precedent that's been followed. But the Speaker of the House could be Joe Rogan. Speaker of the House could be Sean over on the board if we get him enough votes over there. It could be anybody. The Speaker of the House could be Donald Trump. Just by the way the rules are set now. You want to have some fun? You want to dance? You want to have a party? You want to make this election season even more fun than you've ever seen in your entire life? Bring in a DJ, set up some big speakers, get a disco ball, have a party, announce a party, and make Donald Trump the Speaker of the House. Just throwing it out there. 800-288-WBAP, 800-288-9227. I'm James Parker. This is The James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3.